this video, we will continue to talk about rendering in 3D Studio Max. And in this case, we're going to talk about additional effects that we can obtain with the camera, and also about the motion blur that we can achieve with the animation. So in the previous videos, we saw how we can switch from day and night, how to use a single image and use the image-based lighting technique. So we switch from a single object to more complex scenes in exterior, and also in the interior rendering we saw how we can set up cameras to change the brightness or the darkness of the scene, and how we can adjust the exposure and other effects like the depth of field, so how you can place something in focus and something out of focus using the f number or f-stop value in the camera parameters. We also saw how we can create volumetric effects, volumetric light, using, in this case, an area light just placed outside the window, but you need to have like more direct lighting to create this effect. You can have something diffuse. You need to concentrate the light beam, and then you need to adjust the fog that we also see in the exterior. So you can use the fog either for exteriors and interiors, and if you set up the lights correctly, you're gonna have that beautiful and realistic volumetric light effect. So we're going to talk about animation in this video, but remember, if you want to see those effects that we are seeing, you can just open up the sample scenes and you will find volumetric lights, you will find motion blur, you will find depth of field, you will find any particular effects that you want to create, so you can study those sample scenes. Now, we talked about the camera exposure, which is going to be the physical representation and simulation of what happens in reality. So when we change the ISO and the aperture of the of our camera, of our shutter, and also the speed of our camera shutter, so the shutter speed, we're gonna affect the brightness of the scene. So we saw that with the depth of field, if we increase the aperture, we're going to have more depth of field but less light. Now, for the shutter speed, to create the motion blur, we need to have a slow shutter speed, a slow movement of the shutter. So that's going to cause the motion blur to happen, and it's also going to get more light into the scene. This is why often we can see the motion blur effect when we are at night and we take a picture. Usually things are more blurred, and you can see the motion blur because the shutter speed will go slow to capture more light, but also it's going to capture more movements. And we also saw other effects like the camera vignetting. We can always apply this. This is another effect due to the lens, to the camera, to the light getting to the cameras. And so we're gonna also add the camera parameters to the animation parameters. Now, animation stands on the FPS, which means frame per second. So an animation is composed by many images that are going to be displayed in a sequence, and you need to address this value first. So how fluid you want your animation to be. So the frame rate can be like 25 frame per second, or 24 frame per second, or 30 frame per second, or 100 frame per second. So this is going to affect the quality of the animation, but if you want to do something not too heavy, you can use 24 or 25 FPS. That's going to be like a medium value that you can use to have a good animation. Now remember that each frame represents a single rendering, so it means that to have 1 second of animation you need 24 or 25 renderings. So this is going to be really heavy for your computer. You need to have a powerful machine, a powerful PC to render high quality animation. Otherwise, you need to lower the quality of the rendering and also the quality of the animation. Now, don't go too low, like 12 frames per second. Otherwise, it's going to be not fluid. It's going to be like old movies, and it's not going to be great. It's going to look like stop motion animation. Well, if you want, you can do that if you want that effect. So the first really important term here is FPS, or frame rate. And again, just remember that an animation is just a series of renderings placed in sequence. So remember that if you need to do like 10 seconds of animation, you probably need to render like 250, 240 frames or rendering. So it's going to be a long process and really heavy. Now, all these frames can be considered either as keyframes or interpolation frames. So this is the other really important thing to know. So we are talking about frames to define an animation, and fortunately we don't need to create all the frames ourselves. Like in old school animation, they needed to create each single frame, for example, for animated cartoons. Now in our case, we just need to define keyframes and interpolation frames. Now I want to suggest you also a couple of tools here that you can use, like Lumion and Unreal Engine. These are excellent tools for animation. And also Twinmotion. You can create landscape design and really interesting animation easier. These are easier to use and faster to use, and you're gonna have like more interesting details, and everything is more optimized. But if you want to have the highest quality, you can use 3ds Max. You can use also V-Ray, other render engine. So let's proceed here. Let's go back to the keyframes. So again, we have keyframes and interpolation frames. You can see the example there. The red one is going to be like a keyframe, and then what happens in between the keyframes is going to be interpolation frame, meaning that it's going to be calculated by the computer. Then you have different types of interpolation depending on how your animation will be. If it's going to be like a smooth animation or if it's going to be like more mechanic movement. But the most important thing at first is going to be the keyframes. Keyframe are gonna define the essential movement or animation of your character, of your scene, of your camera. You can apply animation to anything. And then later you can change the interpolation. Usually the standard interpolation is smooth, so it's kind of a ease in, ease out setting. Okay, so let's get into our scene, which we use for exteriors and also for interiors. We have some nice natural light coming in. We have portal lights to enhance natural light. And also we added some artificial lights like spotlights. And we can use this now either as a night scene or a day scene. And this is the camera that we used in the previous video to set up the depth of field. So we have a focus point on the statue, and then we can always come back and adjust it. So if I want to create another camera now, I'm gonna just shift and move to create a copy, and I'm gonna use this to create the first animation. So we're gonna start with animating the camera, and we will see also the motion blur effect. So I don't want to create an instance here. I just want to create a copy so that we can modify one without affecting the original one. And I call this animation camera. So I'm gonna go in the view selection. I'm gonna go into cameras and select the animation camera. And this is again another physical camera. So we're gonna get into the shutter speed parameter because this is the one that we need to affect the motion blur effect, as we said. But also this is gonna change the exposure, so we need to balance then the exposure by addressing also the ISO and the f-stop, so the aperture of the shutter. So in case we want to have both depth of field and motion blur, we need to keep the aperture to a value about 1 or 2. Now I'm gonna set up the view a little bit. I'm gonna use like performance mode because when you want to concentrate on the animation, you probably want to have a lighter setup for the scene, so you can use, and you want to concentrate on movements, on not on materials, on or lighting. You just want to concentrate on movement. So you don't really need high quality preview there down there. So we already tested that the rendering looks fine. Everything is in the correct position. The lighting works good. The materials are fine. So when everything has been tested, then you can proceed with the animation just by concentrating on the animation and not caring about anything else. Now we can move the target. So we can animate either the target or the point of view, or actually we can animate both. That's another option. So depending on what shot you want to create, depending on what camera animation you want to create, you need to move the point of view or the target or both. So in this case, you can see nothing is happening. This is the timeline down below, and those are all the the frames that are at our disposal. And then we can choose where to place our key points. Now you can press the arrows to move around the CTI. That's going to be the current time indicator. You can click and drag that little bar, which is going to be again your CTI, around and place the keyframe work in a precise keyframe. You can already start to set up some keyframe, or you can just type the number of frame that you want. Now remember that if you're working, let's say in 25 frames per second, 50 is going to be 2 seconds. If you're working 24, 48 is going to be 2 seconds. Now you can also activate in the statistics panel of the viewport configuration the frame per second. So that's going to show you if you are actually running real time or not, or if you're just going slower. So you can see now that I'm running pretty fast, so that's fine. And also you may want to check, may control the number of polygons, because bigger scenes gonna be heavier again to display in the viewport and also in the rendering. So try to optimize your scene the best you can. Try to eliminate anything that is not visible and that is not actually needed. Now you have some players there. You can go back and forward using the play button or going back and forward frame by frame. You can click on the time configuration to configure there the little clock there to change the frame rate. If you want something preset, you can set up a preset time configuration. You can set up your customized frame per second value if you want. And just remember that increasing this value means creating more renderings to finish your animation, so it's going to take longer. And also you have other stuff here like the playback if you want to real time, if you want to loop, if you want to increase or decrease the speed, and you can define a starting time for the animation and an ending time, or you can change the length. And so you have all these different values here that you can customize. So you can see the timeline now got a little bit bigger because we increased the end time. So let's say we want to create 10 seconds of animation. In 25 per seconds, we need 250 frames. Now, when you create animations, you can also rescale time. So if you create an animation, let's say to 100, and you rescale to 200, you're basically slowing down 2 times the animation if you use rescale time. And you already set up some keyframes, but we didn't set up anything right now. Now you can also change the display of the timeline using seconds and frames, or only frames, or other settings. So you can see now this is the representation with frames and with the seconds if you like it, but I'm gonna keep it as the standard frame visualization, but you can change it. So everything concerning the animation is going to be there in that little player that you can use, as you saw, for many reasons. Now also we need to go back here to the common panel of the render settings, because when we need to render an animation, we cannot leave the single output. We need to have an active segment, or so the from 0 to 250, or we need to have some range that we can define, like from 0 to 100 or 0 50. So we need to define also that, and also the resolution. So if we want full HD or HD ready, we want to change the output size. So this is going to be HD TV video, and we have HD ready, full HD, 2K, 4K. You can customize also your format. Now remember to activate the show save frame, otherwise you're not gonna have the exact proportion of the rendering inside the viewport preview. And then you have other options of what to render and what not, like atmospherics, like environments and things like that. And then we can save the output files by creating a folder. So this is something it's better to do, to create a folder and store there all the different frames that you're going to create from the animation. So I'm going to create a folder here and call it animations, and just going to name the first file name, which could be, just simple animation. And then we can choose to create either a video, but we only have AVI file, or we can create a number of images like JPEG or PNG or Targa, and then we can assembly together, create the sequence of the animation in another software like After Effects or Premiere Pro. So when we will import the images, they're gonna be considered like an animation, not like single images. So you have these options, and usually it's better to render a sequence of images instead of a single video file, because if the video files is not finished, it's gonna be corrupted. It's not gonna be ready, so it's not, you cannot use it. But if you use images always gonna be saved, so you can always retrieve the animation and continue from where you stopped. And your computer can stop anytime for many reasons. So if it stops, the video file will be unreadable, the image will be there. So I think images is better than the video. And also with the PNG, you can save the alpha channel if you have it. So you will have like images without background. So you can like insert the background in a video montage later on. So again, I think it's a pretty useful practice to render images instead of videos. Now I'm just gonna continue here with the animation camera setup, and let's start to create some movements so we can also test the motion blur. So you can see I can use auto key to automatically key everything that is gonna change into the scene. So right now I'm at 0. I'm gonna move to 100 approximately, so it's about 4 seconds of animation, and I'm gonna move the camera around. So this is gonna be like a close-up movement from the wall to the statue. And again, you can also animate the focus point, so it's gonna be like changing also the depth of field if you want. So you can animate the depth of field just as any other thing in 3D Studio. Now you can see that with auto key, it's gonna automatically detect the change in time and in space. So first change the time, then change the space, and with auto key everything is gonna be automatically recorded, so that you can just then press play and see the animated sequence. And there it is. So you can see that it's pretty easy to animate when you're using auto keys. Now sometimes auto key will not be enough. You need some extra help with the direct keying, the manual keying. And if you change here the preview from something rendered to like something more performing like you can see this one here. We don't see the materials, we don't see the shadows, we don't see the lights, but this is going to be faster, so I can play back the animation in real time. So use the other combinations here to have like less quality preview in the viewport, but faster preview. So you can always balance performance and quality. You can get the you can get faster with wireframe and get the full real-time animation to understand how fast or how slow you are going with your camera. You can get a better idea, but you always will need to render out your animation to see how it's gonna work. So if everything looks fine, and you can also see here in the display, you can deactivate like lights and cameras or anything that can slow down the preview or be something that is gonna distract you. So you can filter things, you can make things really lighter so you can go faster. So now let's go here in the Scene Explorer. Also from here we can change the filters. So we can, if you want to concentrate with the cameras, we can isolate the cameras and we can work with them. So you can see when if it's difficult to select sometimes the camera or the camera target, you can also get here to make it easier to spot and select. So this is gonna be now the animation. You can see I'm animating the camera, but I also need to animate the target. So again, by using auto key, every movement that I will do will be tracked down by the software, so it's going to be recorded. And you can see also here it's kind of always going back there because that's where the initial state was, so I need to always fix that. So I can either move frame by frame until I go in the exact frame that I need to address, or I can just type the number of frame inside the panel there, so to insert the exact number. And you can see right now that this is out of focus because the target is far, so you can either change there and use the target distance. So by changing and animating the target, you will also affect the depth of field, or you can do it with numbers. So you can change the distance numerically of the depth of field to change it. So this is going to be an animation also of the depth of field, not only of the movement. So you can see there that right now it's out of focus. I'm gonna auto key that, and then I'm gonna bring it into focus by changing the position of the target. And when you're playing with depth of field effects, I guarantee it's gonna look really realistic because this is actually how camera works in reality. They have all these settings, depth of field, motion blur, and things like that. So let's now deactivate the auto key when you don't need to animate anything, or reactivate the auto key when I want to also change other parameters. You can see that if I work with the spinners, click and drag the spinners there to change the field of view, that's also going to be recorded. So everything that is going to highlight in red is going to be recorded when you use auto key. And in this case, it's going to also record the depth of field. You can see it changing there. And here, for example, I want something more like telescopic. So it's going to quickly switch the type of lens, the type of field of view, the type of focus, everything is gonna be changing here, not only the movement. And there I am. So it's gonna like stay there then. Now be careful on what you record around, because sometimes things can get out of hand. But I'm gonna show you there are some extra panels that you can use to manage the animation, like the dope sheet and the curve editor. Those are gonna help you to keep track of everything you're doing, in order not to make mistakes and create frames that are not needed. Okay, so you can see now it's you can always click and drag the CTI to see if the animation is going too slow, too fast, if it's doing something strange. So remember to test everything before you run your final rendering to the best quality, because you're gonna lose a lot of hours of time to render out an animation. So you want to make something that you are 100% sure that it's working. And again, if I rescale the time here, I can make things faster or slower just by changing the timeline number of frames. Okay, so remember that when you change the position of the keyframes, you're gonna affect also the speed, because speed is related to time and space. So if you decrease the time or the space, you're gonna increase the speed. And now we're gonna go to the shutter speed effect. So to have this visible, you're gonna have to make it faster. So let's try with a frame. You need to render an entire sequence, but so if you run a render here, it's not going to show you the frame that you're at, but it's going to show you the first frame of the animation. And we probably can already see some blurriness due to the depth of field or the motion blur. And you probably want to change the exposure here, so it's looking too dark, because if the shutter speed is pretty fast, it's gonna be really dark. If it's gonna be slower, it's gonna be more bright. So I'm just gonna change the duration here, let's say 5. So this should be now a little bit brighter because it's gonna be slower. And there it is. You can see it's brighter, and also we see more motion blur. That's the motion blur right there. So the more you increase the value of the duration, the more you're gonna have things that are gonna be blurred, not because of the depth of field in this case, but because of the movement of the camera. And also the faster objects will be also more blurred. The faster will be the animation, the more motion blur you will have inside your animation. And so this is how you can set up. It's really easy. It's just enabling the motion blur there in the shutter section and addressing the duration. Now I'm just gonna proceed here. And want to use some chamfer box there to create a TV. Now this is another option. You can animate materials. So just like you create emissive panels, you can create emissive materials with video instead of a static image. And we also can animate other things, but we're gonna see those later. Just want to do this example here because it can be really cool effect to show. So what I'm trying to do here is to create first the black part of the screen, and then I can select the middle part and apply another material. You can also affect I'm gonna extrude this and try to create the part of the panel inside the frame of the TV. So you can use polygonal modeling real quick and real fast to create some nice TV screen, flat screen. And now let's go and create an emissive material in Arnold. So don't need the roughness, don't need the glossiness there, so I'm gonna bump up the roughness. Just gonna jump into emission and assign a bitmap, but in this case it's not gonna be an image, it's gonna be a video. So I'm just gonna get a video that I have here from my database. Can be like your video from the holidays, or can be something more professional, whatever. So you can display like infographics also. And if you play also with a cutout, you can create like transparent screens, like sci-fi, or like other like Minority Report and movies like that. Now you can also, if you don't have AVI format, you can also use whatever converter online to change the AVI file into another file, or the other way. So if you have like an MP4, you want to change it into AVI, you can use one of these converters. So I'm just going to select here the video that I want to convert, which is going to be in MP4, and I will convert it into the AVI to use it in 3ds Max as a bitmap for my material. Now also, when you create an animation, you saw that you only have AVI. So if you want to create another format like MP4, you can do the opposite. So just upload here your or in another website, upload your video and then convert it. You can do it also in Premiere Pro, in After Effects. You can convert in any format. You can compress, decompress, do all sorts of operations. So I'm just gonna now upload the converted file. Okay, so right now I've just downloaded it. Then I'm gonna go back here, click on the bitmap slot, and get it from the folder where I store it. It's gonna be again here, and there you go, AVI, and now it's in. Now I'm gonna place it and just replace the material. Now you can see it applied it to all the parts of my screen. So I'm just gonna go back into my screen here and select everything, apply the first one, and then select the other one. Okay, if it doesn't do it like this, you just need to go in the material ID, just change the material ID. One is gonna be 1, and the other one is gonna be 2. And if it doesn't work again, you can just create a multi-material. Let's see here. So this is gonna be material 1, and the other is gonna be material 2. Okay, if it doesn't work, just create a multi-material with 2 layers only. One for the frame and one for the emissive screen. So I'm gonna delete all these layers. I just need 2. First one, I'm gonna drag it there in the first ID, in the second ID, and then I'm gonna drag and drop, and now it's gonna work. So if I press play, well, I need to see something more than a preview. And so what I can do is to go back here, and there you go. So I will check on the texture to be visible. So now I can actually see the video playing. You can see it's actually animating there with this high quality preview. So if I press play, I'm gonna see the preview if it's not too slow, because it's a pretty heavy effect to render. So remember that if you want to render the entire animation, you can do it, or you can switch to single frame if you want to just see one frame of the animation. Now this is the light coming from outside, which is actually a spotlight. This is to create the volumetric effect that you saw at the beginning of the video. So you can create a portal and uncheck then the portal option and create a really concentrated beam affecting the directionality, or you can create just a spotlight, which is going to be probably easier, but you have the options. It needs to be a concentrated beam of light. So there you go. So if you go the quad, we can also use textures here, which can be again some animated texture. So you can create a video projector instead of creating a TV screen, just by using the same technique. Now I'm gonna change the scene again, just to show you another example of the motion blur. So right now I'm using here the HDRI image-based lighting scene, and I'm looking for the color correction in the slate material. Now this is another way you can do some post-production on the images that you're using, whether they are texture or like images or videos. You can change here also the brightness, the contrast. So you do have some nodes in the slate material editor that can help you to edit your images or videos directly in 3ds Max, but in my opinion, I think you should switch to another software when you're finished here in 3ds Max. Now just to show you another example again of motion blur, I'm gonna move this car. So again, remember that you need some movement. So we're gonna first we move the camera. Now we're gonna move an object, just to do like the two main situations that you can create. So just go there, be sure that the shutter speed is correct, and also the motion blur is activated. And let's see here, these are some planes for the shadows. We're gonna keep those, and there you go. So I've added some planes there for the shadows, just as we did before. So this is gonna be like moving, so you need bigger planes for the shadows. And now let's set the first key here. So instead of using auto key, now I'm gonna use set key to show you another tool, so you can do it manually rather than automatically. So I'm gonna move first the time, then move the object into space, and then set the key. Manual key. So I'm just gonna click on the plus icon there to add a key. And now you can see the car is moving. We can also go in the object properties here, and you can see we have the possibility to activate the motion path, so we can actually see the path of our animation. So we can see how the car is going to be moving, and all these little dots, they represent the frames. So the closer they are, the slower will go the animation, and so this is how they are going to be. You can see there is an easy in and easy out. And we saw also the motion blur. So if it's too much, the motion blur, I'm going to decrease the duration, because this is probably a really fast object. So I'm going to decrease the shutter speed So sorry, in this case, I'm gonna increase the speed of the shutter so it can capture better the movement. So you can see there, now I can see it better. Perhaps it's still too blurred. So maybe I wanna change that. You can also change the type of value. So in this case, I'm just gonna go half of the previous duration. So it's gonna be even faster and it's gonna capture more and more movement until I find the correct balance. So we're gonna continue to talk about animation in the next video.